What's going on, everyone? Tonight, I have 4 disturbing stories from pizza delivery drivers who experience things that still haunt them to this day. These are real accounts from people who were just trying to make a living, but ended up encountering something far more sinister than they ever imagined. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into these chilling tales. Story 1. The House That Wasn't There. This first story comes from Jake, a college student who worked nights delivering pizzas in a small town in Oregon. Jake had been doing the job for about 6 months when this happened, and he thought he knew every street in his delivery area like the back of his hand. It was a Thursday night in late October, around 10:30 p.m. The rain was coming down hard, and Jake was looking forward to finishing his shift and getting home. That's when he got the call that would change everything. The order was for a large pepperoni pizza and some breadsticks. Nothing unusual there. The address was 1247 Elm Street, and the customer's name was listed as M. Henderson. Jake had never delivered to that address before, but Elm Street was in his usual delivery zone, so he didn't think much of it. He loaded up his car and headed out into the stormy night. The windshield wipers were working overtime as he navigated the dark, rain-slicked streets. When he turned onto Elm Street, something felt off. The street seemed longer than usual, stretching into an inky darkness that his headlights couldn't quite penetrate. Jake drove slowly, checking house numbers. 1239, 1241, 1243, 1245. And then nothing. Where 1247 should have been, there was just an empty lot overgrown with weeds and tall grass. He pulled over and checked the address on his phone again. 1247 Elm Street. This was definitely the right spot. He called the store to double-check the address. His manager, Tom, confirmed it was correct and told him to call the customer. Jake dialed the number, and after 3 rings, a man answered. "Hello." The voice was deep and gravelly, with an odd echo to it. "Hi, this is Jake from Tony's Pizza. I'm at 1247 Elm Street, but I don't see a house here. Can you help me out?" There was a long pause before the man responded. "I'm looking right at you through my window. You're parked right in front of my house." Jake's blood ran cold. He looked around frantically. There was no house. Just that empty lot and the house numbers jumping from 1245 to 1249. "Sir, I'm really sorry, but there's no house at this address. Are you sure you gave us the right?" "I can see your car," the voice interrupted. "Red Honda Civic. License plate starting with 7G4. Jake's hands started shaking. That was exactly right. His car, his license plate. But how could someone see him if there was no house? He got out of his car and walked to where 1247 should be. The empty lot was there, just like before, but now he noticed something that made his skin crawl. In the overgrown grass, barely visible in the darkness, were the remains of a foundation. Old concrete blocks, partially buried and covered with moss. This had been a house once, but it was long gone. His phone rang again. Same number. "You're standing on my front porch now," the voice said. Jake was standing in tall grass, nowhere near a porch. "Come inside. I'm getting hungry." Jake ran back to his car and drove off as fast as he safely could in the rain. When he got back to the store, he told Tom what happened. Tom pulled up the order on the computer and his face went white. "Jake," Tom said slowly, "this order, it's from 1982. Jake looked at the screen. The date stamp on the order showed October 28, 1982. But that was impossible. The computer system had only been installed 2 years ago. Tom did some research and found out that there had been a house at 1247 Elm Street. It burned down in 1982, killing a man named Marcus Henderson. The fire happened on October 28th, exactly 40 years ago to the day. Jake quit the next morning. He never found out who paid for that pizza order that showed up in their system, or how someone in 1982 knew exactly what car he drove. But sometimes, on rainy October nights, he still gets calls from unknown numbers. He never answers them. Story 2. The Regular Customer. The second story comes from Maria, who worked at a pizza place in suburban Chicago. Maria was known for being reliable and friendly with customers, which is why she always got assigned to deliver to the regular customers. One of these regulars was a man who ordered every Friday night, Same time, same order. Every Friday at exactly 8:47 p.m., they would get a call for 2 large pizzas, 1 Supreme, 1 Meat Lovers, to be delivered to 4521 Maple Drive. The customer always paid exact change plus a $5 tip, and he never said much beyond, "Thank you," when Maria handed over the pizzas. Maria had been making this delivery for about 3 months when she started noticing things that bothered her. The man, who looked to be in his 40s with thinning brown hair and thick glasses, would always take the pizzas inside before paying her. He'd ask her to wait on the porch while he got the money. This wasn't unusual. Lots of customers did this. But Maria started to notice sounds coming from inside the house while she waited. Voices. Multiple voices. Sometimes it sounded like a party was going on. Laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. Other times, it was quieter. Just the low murmur of several people talking. What bothered Maria was that she never saw any other cars in the driveway or parked on the street. No lights were on in the house except for the porch light. And when the man came back with the money, he was always slightly out of breath, like he'd been rushing around. One Friday night in November, Maria decided to satisfy her curiosity. After the man took the pizzas inside, instead of waiting on the porch, she quietly walked around to the side of the house. The living room window had thin curtains, and she could just make out shapes inside. What she saw made her stomach turn. The man was sitting alone at a dining room table. 2 place settings were laid out across from each other, and he was carefully placing slices of pizza on both plates. But here's the thing that made Maria's blood freeze. He was talking to the empty chair across from him. Having a full conversation with someone who wasn't there. "How was your day, honey?" he was saying to the empty chair. "Oh, that's nice. Try the Supreme. I got extra mushrooms just like you like." Then he would pause, as if listening to a response, nod, and continue the conversation. Maria watched in horrified fascination as he carried on this elaborate dinner conversation with no one. But it got worse. After a few minutes, she heard him say, "Maria's outside. She's been our delivery girl for months now. Such a sweet girl." Then he paused and his expression changed. His voice became stern. "No, absolutely not. We've talked about this." Maria realized he was talking about her. To no one. She started to back away from the window, but then she heard something that made her freeze. Another voice. A woman's voice, coming from inside the house. "But she's seen us, Harold. She knows." Maria ran back to her car and waited. When the man, Harold, came out with the money, he seemed more agitated than usual. His hands were shaking as he handed her the cash. "Everything okay?" Maria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Harold looked at her for a long moment, then glanced back at his house. "My wife. She doesn't like strangers knowing our business." "Your wife," Maria said before she could stop herself. "I didn't know you were married." Harold's face went completely pale. She doesn't like to be seen. She's very private." He handed her the money and quickly went back inside. Maria drove straight to the police station and told an officer what she'd seen. The officer was familiar with the address. Harold Morrison lived alone at 4521 Maple Drive. His wife, Janet, had died in a car accident 2 years ago. Harold had been struggling with the loss and had been in and out of psychiatric care. The officer assured Maria that Harold wasn't dangerous, just deeply troubled and lonely. But that didn't explain the voice Maria had heard. The woman's voice that had known her name and talked about her like she was a threat. Maria never delivered to Harold again. She asked her manager to assign that route to someone else. But about a month later, her co-worker Danny came back from a Friday night delivery looking shaken. "That guy on Maple Drive," Danny said. "The one who orders 2 pizzas every week. He wanted to know where Maria was. Said his wife was asking for her specifically." Maria quit the next day. She still wonders who or what Harold was really talking to in that house. And sometimes, she gets the unsettling feeling that something is still asking for her. Story 3. The Night Shift Encounter. This third story is from Alex, who worked the late-night shift at a 24-hour pizza place in a rough part of Detroit. Alex was used to dealing with drunk customers, late-night weirdos, and the occasional sketchy delivery. But nothing had prepared him for what happened on a freezing February night. It was almost 2 a.m. when the call came in. A woman's voice, soft and scared sounding, ordered a small cheese pizza to be delivered to an address in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. The address was for a warehouse district that Alex had delivered to before. Sometimes the security guards working overnight shifts would order food. "Please hurry," the woman had said before hanging up. "And please be careful." Alex thought it was an odd thing to say, but he loaded up the pizza and headed out. The warehouse district was about a 15-minute drive, and at this time of night, the streets were completely deserted. Street lights were few and far between, creating long stretches of darkness between pools of dim yellow light. When Alex arrived at the address, he saw it was an old textile warehouse that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Most of the windows were boarded up, and the parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds. There was no sign of life anywhere. Alex checked the address again. This was definitely the right place. He tried calling the customer, but the call went straight to voicemail. He was about to leave when he noticed a faint light coming from a window on the second floor. He got out of his car and walked to what looked like a main entrance. The door was slightly ajar, which seemed strange for an abandoned building. Alex called out, "Pizza delivery." His voice echoed in the empty space. "Up here," came a woman's voice from somewhere above. "Second floor. Follow the lights." Alex stepped inside and immediately felt uneasy. The warehouse was dark and smelled of rust and decay, but there were small LED lights on the floor, creating a path toward a staircase in the back. It looked like someone had deliberately laid out a trail for him to follow. As he climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoed loudly in the empty building. The lights continued along the second-floor hallway, leading to a door at the far end. Alex could see light seeping out from under the door. "Just leave it by the door," the woman's voice called out when he approached. "The money's under the mat." Alex looked down and saw a $20 bill tucked under a dirty welcome mat. The pizza only cost $12, so this was a decent tip. But something felt wrong. Why wouldn't she just open the door? "Ma'am," Alex called out, "I need you to sign the receipt." There was a long pause before the woman responded. "I can't open the door right now. Just take the money and go. Please." Alex was about to leave when he heard something that made his blood run cold. From behind the door came the sound of someone else moving around. Heavy footsteps. And then a man's voice, low and threatening. "Tell him to leave the pizza and get out. Now." The woman's voice came again, but this time it was different. Panicked. "Please, just go. Please." Alex realized what was happening. This woman was in trouble. Someone was holding her against her will, and she had used the pizza delivery as a way to get help. That's why she had said to be careful. Alex quietly pulled out his phone and called 911. He whispered the address to the dispatcher and explained the situation. Then he made a decision that probably saved that woman's life. Instead of leaving, Alex started talking loudly. "Okay, ma'am, I just need you to sign this receipt real quick. Company policy. I can't leave without a signature." "I told you to leave," the man's voice shouted from behind the door. "Sorry, sir," Alex called back, "but I'll lose my job if I don't get a signature. It'll just take a second." He kept talking, buying time until he heard sirens in the distance. The man behind the door must have heard them too, because suddenly there was the sound of a struggle, shouting, and then a door slamming somewhere in the building. The police arrived and found the woman tied up in the room. Her ex-boyfriend had been holding her there for 3 days. He escaped through a back window, but they caught him 2 blocks away. The woman, whose name was Sarah, thanked Alex with tears in her eyes. She had been praying that someone would realize something was wrong and call for help. The pizza delivery had been her desperate attempt to get someone to that building. Alex was called a hero by the local news, but he still gets chills thinking about that night. What if he had just left the pizza and walked away? What if he hadn't realized what was really happening? The scariest part is that Alex later found out the man had done this before. 2 other women had gone missing in the area over the past year. Their cases were never solved. Sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who can't ask for it directly. Alex learned that night that being a delivery driver means more than just bringing food. Sometimes, you might be someone's only hope. Story 4. The Final Delivery. The last story comes from David, a pizza delivery driver who worked in a small mountain town in Colorado. David had been doing deliveries for almost 2 years and thought he'd seen everything. But his final delivery was one that made him quit the job and never look back. It was late December, just a few days before Christmas. Snow was falling heavily, and most people were staying home with their families. David was hoping to finish his shift early when one last order came in at 11:45 p.m. The order was unusual: 13 large pizzas, all with different toppings, to be delivered to an address up in the hills outside of town. The total came to over $200, which was the biggest single order David had ever handled. The customer had paid by credit card over the phone and left a $50 tip. The address was for a house that David had never delivered to before, even though he knew the area pretty well. It was about a 20-minute drive up a winding mountain road that got pretty treacherous in the snow. David loaded up his car with the pizzas and started the drive. The snow was coming down harder now, and his windshield wipers were struggling to keep up. The mountain road was narrow and poorly lit, with steep drop-offs on one side and a wall of rock on the other. About halfway up the mountain, David started to feel like something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed, but every time he checked his rearview mirror, there was nothing there except swirling snow in his taillights. When he finally reached the address, he was surprised to see a large, modern house blazing with lights. Cars were parked all along the driveway and the street. Expensive cars, too. BMWs, Mercedes, a couple of Porsches. It looked like some kind of upscale party was going on. David grabbed the pizzas and walked to the front door. He could hear music and laughter coming from inside, and through the windows, he could see well-dressed people mingling around. It looked like a Christmas party for wealthy people. He rang the doorbell, and after a few moments, a man in an expensive suit answered. He was middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch. "Ah, the pizza," the man said with a big smile. "Perfect timing. Come in, come in." David stepped inside and was immediately struck by how warm and inviting the house was. A fire was crackling in a huge stone fireplace, Christmas music was playing softly, and the smell of expensive cologne and wine filled the air. "Just set those on the kitchen counter," the man said, gesturing toward a large, modern kitchen where several people were gathered around, talking and laughing. As David arranged the pizzas on the counter, he couldn't help but notice how friendly everyone was. People kept coming up to him, thanking him for coming out in the snow, asking about his drive up the mountain. One woman offered him a glass of wine to warm up before he drove back down. "That's really nice of you," David said, "but I don't drink when I'm driving. Especially not in this weather." The woman smiled. "Of course. How about some coffee then? Or hot chocolate?" David was cold and the offer was tempting, but he wanted to get back down the mountain before the snow got worse. "Thanks, but I should really get going." That's when he noticed something strange. As friendly as everyone was being, nobody was actually eating the pizza. The boxes were sitting there, unopened, while people continued to drink wine and eat what looked like fancy appetizers from silver trays. "Excuse me," David said to the man who had answered the door, "but aren't you guys going to eat the pizza?" The man laughed. "Oh, those aren't for us. Those are for later. Later. For the others. They'll be here soon." David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold weather outside. "The others." Before the man could answer, David heard something that made his blood freeze. Car doors slamming outside. Lots of them. And voices, angry, shouting voices. The well-dressed people in the house suddenly went quiet. The man who had been so friendly a moment before was now looking at David with an expression that was completely different. Cold. Calculating. "You should have stayed for that drink," the man said quietly. David heard heavy footsteps on the front porch, and then the door burst open. A group of rough-looking men came storming in, and David immediately realized what was happening. This wasn't a Christmas party. This was some kind of business meeting. And those pizzas weren't for a party. They were for the people who had just arrived. "Is this him?" one of the newcomers asked, pointing at David. "He's just the delivery guy," the well-dressed man said. "He was just leaving." David didn't wait to hear more. He bolted for the back door, running through the kitchen and out into the snow. Behind him, he could hear shouting and the sound of people chasing him. He ran through the trees behind the house, slipping and sliding in the snow, until he reached his car. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition, but finally, the engine started, and he raced down the mountain as fast as he dared. When David got back to the pizza place, he called the police and reported what had happened. But when the cops went to check out the address the next day, they found the house empty. No cars, no people, no sign that any party had taken place. The credit card used to pay for the pizzas turned out to be stolen. The phone number was traced to a burner phone that had been thrown away. David quit his job the next week and moved to a different state. He never found out what kind of meeting he had stumbled into, or what those people were planning to do with 13 pizzas at midnight in a house full of criminals. But sometimes, when it's snowing heavily at night, David remembers the feeling of being chased through those dark woods, and he wonders what would have happened if he had accepted that drink. So there you have it. 4 terrifying stories from pizza delivery drivers who encountered things far more dangerous than bad weather or difficult customers. From houses that don't exist to customers who aren't alive, from kidnapping victims to criminal meetings, these drivers learned that sometimes the most ordinary job can lead to the most extraordinary horrors. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories. And remember, the next time you order pizza late at night, spare a thought for the driver who's bringing it to you. You never know what they might encounter on their way to your door. Sweet dreams, everyone.